Hello and welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast. My name is Will Chernoff, and on this bonus episode, James Danderfer hosted me for an episode of his Instagram live show, Monday Midday Live. I'm bringing it to you here in podcast form. You can find James on Instagram at James Danderfer. Check out other episodes of his show and find his gig with the Vancouver Jazz Orchestra at the Shadbolt on Sunday, December 4th, coming up. Ticket link in the description. Let's go.
If we want a better scene in the city, then musicians need to perhaps more consciously work towards it and not put the blame on the city.
Okay, so fair warning, we recorded this into our earbuds, so conversational quality, buyer beware on that. James hosted this conversation with me about practicing. That's his usual Monday Midday Live topic, but we also talk state of the Vancouver jazz scene, personal development, and more. I had a great time, and I want to thank James Danderfer again for hosting me on this show and allowing me to bring it to you here. James's conversation with me up next.
Will, hey,
What's up?
what is going on? You've got the Canadian flag in the background.
You know it. I work
Got
for an
this-
American company, so I gotta rep it. Gotta rep it.
Wait, you work for an American company?
I do. I work for Dave Douglas at his label Greenleaf Music.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You don't really promote that. You don't tell people that.
Eh, well, okay. I mean, it's pretty new thing. For me, it kind of came out of nowhere this year. And I think he's good. I don't know if Dave needs my exposure. I think he's doing all right.
We all need your exposure, all of us, right?
Oh,
Can't hurt. Can't hurt.
yeah.
Thanks for joining me, Will. And this was basically we had talked about, or you had emailed me, and so we were kind of emailing back and forth, and then I wanted to talk to you, and then I was talking to you about an hour ago, and
Uh-huh.
and I said, well, can we just talk about this on the thing that we were going to talk about?
Yeah.
So we're putting it all together here. We're putting it all together.
Yeah. You know what they call that? They call it building in public, building with the garage door open, open sourcing it to the fans, all that good stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Building in public. All right.
Yeah.
How's the music going?
Oh, it's so weird. I mean, I've not fully recovered at all from the last couple of years, probably like a lot of people, right? Because going into COVID, I was touring in a folk band called Early Spirit. So performance was my whole life. And then Rhythm Changes, the blog and the podcast, that's what I kind of started over the next year-ish after that stopped so that I could get back involved in the jazz community. Because I felt like I had left it in a place where I didn't want to leave it. Like I felt like I wasn't tapped into what was happening anymore. I was out of touch with my friends that I had since I was a teenager here. I didn't have a thing where I was participating regularly anymore. And I've been so fortunate that I've been able to participate again now more than ever in some ways in the last couple of years. Playing is like still the last thing though that's coming on board that way. Like I haven't had a regular playing outlet in those years. And now that I'm playing a couple of gigs around a new album that I put out this fall, like that's finally starting to come back. And I've got my trio that I'm playing with. And I just hope I can keep riding that a little bit more over the next couple months, because it's great. Like that's what it's all about. When you have those people who you want to spend that time with, you want to be hanging with regularly, and you want to play with, and to be able to do that again is really great. But it's early days in terms of coming back. I'm really just kind of starting to get that back together.
Yeah. And how come that you said that's the last thing to sort of get pulled along, so to speak? Is it because you're still busy with Dave Douglas and rhythm changes, and what's going on there?
Yeah, Dave Douglas thing more recent, so that's been hitting me hard over the last couple months as I've just really been brought on board there since the summer, and I wasn't getting out a lot because I was just trying to stay focused on that and not fall far behind, kind of thing, as I was learning the ropes. So
Mm-hmm.
that was part of it for sure, getting used to that new job this summer and fall. But before then, to be honest, I felt really conflicted with rhythm changes. Like I would still practice, like, and we can talk about practice because you talk about practice all the time, right? And I like it when you
Yeah.
talk about practice. I learn from you, so thank you for doing that. I don't practice as much as your previous guest, Jesse Cahill, but I get in my time here and there, right?
I
But it
don't
was
either.
like, yeah, something we all have in common, right? We need to find common ground here.
Mm-hmm.
But performance wise, like I felt conflicted because I was like, well, I'm trying to line up interviews with people and I'm trying to review people's albums and I'm trying to book them on the podcast. There's no way that I can, book gigs with some of these people as well, right? Like that wouldn't make sense. It's like I'm double dipping with the same group of people and I didn't know how to feel about that or make sense of it. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know if it was okay, and like there's no correct answer coming down from on high about whether or not it's okay. So obviously that's just kind of a subjective thing, but I guess it just took me a long time to get comfortable with that.
Yes. Yes. Um, all right. Speaking of practice, have you practiced today?
I have, yeah. I haven't practiced though. I played some guitar because I write on the guitar and I think on the guitar a fair bit. I don't always have my keyboard set up in my room, but
Yeah.
I've got my guitar right there. So I did play some guitar already today.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Um, Someone asked me that it was this guy that I hadn't seen in a while, great clarinet repairman in OK Falls, Peter Spriggs, and I ran into him. And the first thing, this was years ago, but the first thing he said to me is, "Have you played your clarinet today?" Um, and I said, "No, no, I haven't." And um, I don't. It was such a like inane detail, but I remember that because I felt guilty. I immediately felt guilty because it was like, it was the afternoon practice. I'm sure I could have found 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm not looking to make you or anyone else feel guilty. I'm really not. It's the other thing that was for me, that question was, the reason it hit home is because it is really important to me. It's something that sustains me and I really want to do, yet it's not urgent, and so other things will come up that are less important but more urgent, and it's easy to table the practice time and say, okay, well, I'll do that 15 minutes later today. And so when someone asked me that question, it's like, yeah, this is something that I want to be able to say yes to, that because that that um, that tells me that I've got my priorities straight.
Yeah.
That was just for me. I'm not putting this on you. I'm just I think about that moment often. So
Yeah, I think about that in terms of exercise. This is totally out of left field, but do you do yoga ever?
not consistently, but I do it very occasionally.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I feel like that when a lot of the times I end up doing it in the evening, and sometimes really late. Like if I'm coming back from a gig or something, and I do it with my spouse whenever I can. Rarely do it alone these days. Really saved my life early on in COVID though, in terms of giving me something like that. And I really prioritized just hitting that and doing like 30 minutes of yoga like 6 or 7 days a week, like for the whole kind of early COVID year.
Yeah.
And then, it just trying to find my rhythm of that. I think about that a lot of the same way that you think and write and talk about practice. I'm such a loosey-goosey practice person, though, so that's why I enjoy hearing you talk about practice, because I often practice at night. I often do it as like an unwinding thing. I do it as like a thing when I don't want to be staring at screens anymore during the day. It's not something that I like knock out at the top of my days, hardly ever. It'll be
Yeah.
like a valve, like a release valve for
Yeah.
me. I guess that just kind of fits into, people have different priorities and different different approaches to the career and different role that they need for it. Like I'm thinking back to Jesse again, because I'm a watcher of this series, and I'm thinking about the people who have been on recently, and he was the most recent one. So I vaguely remember what he was talking to you about last week, and his approach of it being, like a craftsperson or a tradesperson, and about he feels that that's the level of responsibility that he assumes and why he practices so much. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of known that that's not my role. So I don't hold that expectation that I'm going to treat it that way, but I like to make sure that it still does what I need it to do, which is for it to be that valve that still happens very often, as a release for me, so that when I'm doing my own projects. And that's the other thing, is I'm not really like a session guy. Like I don't get hired to play in a lot of other people's gigs or play in the studio
Mm-hmm.
very much. It's not part of my mix of what's, so like 99% of my playing is like on my own projects. So as
Mm-hmm.
long as it's like feeling creative, for me, and happening regularly, so that when something like this run of shows that my trio and I are doing come up, then I'm good to go. Then,
Mm-hmm.
like, as far as what practicing means to me right now, like that's what I need it to be.
So you need it to be so you need it to be a release, or you need it to be
I need
preparing.
it to be a little bit of both at the same time, which is like the finesse part of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want it to feel like a big endeavor to prepare for a gig or a run of gigs that will come up for me at any given time. Like, I played at the Tangent 2 weeks ago ish now. I'm playing at Frankie's this week on Friday at the Late Show. I'm playing at Second Floor Gastown after that. I'm playing somewhere else after that in January. So it's like, I don't want this to feel like, oh my gosh, it's crunch time. Now I have to like get all my stuff ready. I want it to be like just a part of the process, and then it
Yeah.
just so happens that it's a stage of that where it's coming out into the world more, and then I
Yeah.
can enjoy that aspect of it. So as long as I'm on my instrument consistently enough, and doing my typical things that I would do to warm up and do to work out on, that doesn't feel scary, or doesn't feel like I'm adding a lot more to my plate, then when those opportunities come up, then it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that. It's the two things sort of that sort of need to balance for you. So practicing needs to be a release, uh, and it needs to be in preparation for something. Right? Is that accurate?
Uh-huh, yeah, because if it's only a release, then it's aimless, right? Or at least it feels that way to me, because then it does, the same level of motivation is not there, which is
Mm-hmm.
what will prompt me to continue at the same clip, right? So as long as the looking ahead and the preparation part of it is there, and I know what I'm working on, then the motivation is there, and then the release is like what allows it to feel good there. And like, again, for exercise, whether it's like yoga and running, I guess, are my two main forms of exercise right now. Like, I used to play a lot of ball hockey,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a part of it as well, and I had some stuff around that, and like I had my goalie pads, and I had need to be flexible, and skate and that kind of thing. But right now it's mostly just yoga and running. So like the looking ahead is like, I want to feel good, and I want to feel healthy, and I want to have that goal of like being able to do that a certain amount every week and feel good. And the release is like the actual feeling of what it's like when you're doing it and after you do it. Like, I know that after I do this, I'll feel good, kind of thing, that day. But the
Mm-hmm.
preparation part of it on the exercise analogy is, I know that if I keep doing this, I will feel good and healthy in general. Plus the feeling of, on this day, I can get myself to do it by saying, oh, I know after I do this today, after I run or after I do yoga today, I'm going to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's I like that. It's simple and it's clear.
It has to be,
and
otherwise
and
it's lost on me.
yeah. Me too. And it's a different word than I usually use for practicing. But you know, I like to say, I like to use words such as engaging, even enjoyable. I tend not to say practicing is fun, but it's only because I think there's a certain association with that makes it seem sort of um, not not intentional enough or not serious enough. You know, if you say, "Oh, practicing is fun," um, but release, you know, that's another good word for it. And I use that word all the time with my students when it comes to just playing a note. You know, if you're breathing well, you're filling the lungs, and then once your lungs are full, they just want to release. And so when I go to play, I want it to be a release, but I want it to feel like a release. Even just one note. Feels good. Feels good to do that. And I like how you use that word. It makes me think of that, and just sort of the headspace that you're then in when you go to practice. If that's kind of your bar, if that's what you're expecting, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable. And then you're going to take that feeling, you've practiced that, so then you will take that to the stage because you've been practicing this relationship with music. And then the other thing was prep. You know, we need a goal, something to work towards. And I agree. I have thought in the past, even if I couldn't perform, I would still want to play music, you know, just at home. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
Wait, hit me with that one more time. I heard that, but I just want to make sure I got what you said there. What did you say?
Well, in the past, I've said that even if I didn't have any gigs, like if I wasn't playing outside of the practice room, that I would still play music at home. I would still practice. But I'm not so sure that's true, because I've never had that. I've never. Well, the pandemic was a little different, but you know, there was always the hope of performing soon, right? There's always a gig to work towards, and or to stay in shape for. And so, yeah, I think we do need. I think we all need that thing to prepare for.
Yeah. Yeah, I if release was the word for the other part, the part where on this day, you know how you end up feeling after you do it. Like the word for the ongoing thing is definitely like motivation for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Release and motivation.
Yeah.
All right. While we're on the subject of practicing, I'm going to hit you with the lightning round. All right.
Uh-huh.
Ready for this? Here we go. This is Blazing with Will and Jay. All right. So, Will, in what period of your career have you practiced the most?
When I was in my band. So the performing years were mostly like 2016, 17 up to 2019 and up to COVID. Yeah. So like 2017 to 2019, especially.
Yeah. What period have you practiced the least?
You know, this I tell this sometimes that I haven't told it on any podcast episodes or something. So it's funny that you bring that up here. And you might think it's a weird answer, but to be honest, it's so I went to CAP for 1 year and then I left.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that year. That was the year that, and that's probably the opposite answer to a lot of people. And it's kind of unfortunate but it's the truth. Like that 1 year, like 2013, that I was up there, that's the point where I played the least. Now, why? Well, one, it's because I was lucky enough that I just rode the wave in my high school band program. That's where it all began for me. And I was just surrounded by all these people who were better than me there, who I could hop in and jam with, and who I had like tiny little gigs that where people in the community would have us. There were opportunities for me there that I'm so grateful for. And I had the people to play with. So I was playing there and I was practicing like a madman to try and be able to do that because I was self-taught at the time, other than my school, like no lessons. And so I was playing a lot at that time, like in my teen years. And then after I left, then I started working at a nonprofit, and I started very, very part-time, and I worked my way up there kind of over the years, like 5 or 6 years, until I left that to start the band. And so during that time I was practicing a lot because I was working for like a violin school kind of organization. I was like doing their performances with them and working on their arrangements and rehearsing the music with them. So and this was like Celtic music, like Irish and Scottish music, fiddle music. I didn't know anything about that. So I had to cram that really hard. I had to shed it really hard.
Yeah.
And I loved learning about that kind of music from scratch. So I played a lot then. Now, when I was at CAP, I didn't play as much because I was commuting all the time because I'm here in New Westminster. I live here again now, but I was living at my mom's place in New West, and I was commuting back and forth to CAP every day. So that's a couple hours there. And I was going out to shows. I started drinking, and I kind of had my problems with alcohol abuse that I sorted out, and I'm sober now. But I did a lot of like dumb teenager stuff, and I was like on buses and SkyTrains all the time, and I was like living the college life for like 1 year, and that was the least that I ever practiced.
Yeah. Oh man, that is a very interesting answer. Okay, the lightning round continues. What tools do you like to have in the practice room with you?
Well, I always got to have a plug-in
order of
tuner.
importance.
I always got to have a plug-in tuner, and I just use the metronome on my phone. So I don't have like a standalone metronome in my room right now, but I tune my instruments when I wake up in the morning, like because I'm in my home office here. My home office is just my all-purpose place. Like all the rhythm changes stuff happens here. All my practicing happens here. I just kind of live in this 100 square foot box most of the day, and then I go out to the rest of our place like in the afternoon and the evening. So I got my instruments in here, and I like to tune my instruments when I get in this room for the first time. So I tune my upright, my electric, and my guitar. Then I know it's kind of like what you were saying about practice. I guess it is a little bit the same way, because then I know I've like touched them at least once, right? Like I've done something.
Right.
And so it's kind of satisfying to check them and tune them. So my plug-in tuner and my metronome, and that's it. And I got my, I play acoustic guitar, so I got my capo on there all the time, but that's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. And so let's and I would say apps count as tools. They're not physical tools, but these days, I mean, I have my tuning app. I have my timer and my metronome app. Okay, so if you only have time to practice one thing, what is it going to be?
Oh, it's definitely like an exercise that I started doing when I was in high school, and I still do it all the time, but now I just do it in all the keys. I used to only do it in like F and B flat, but it's just like 1, 3, 5, 7 chord toned up and down stuff, like change like a certain direction on that. I can try and do that. I don't want to like destroy people's ears by unplugging my earbuds right now, but if I put this sideways and down for now, sorry about that, and I just grab my guitar, I want to know if you can hear it, but I don't know if you will be able to hear it, so I'm not sure about that. Can you hear this?
Yes.
Yeah, so if I just go, this kind of thing where you go like, if I do the key of F and I just, right, like that kind of thing. And then like I could do the other direction, right? Like you could you'd go like like that kind of thing. I do that and on bass, right? Like on electric or upright, and I do that pretty slowly, and I look for tone. I don't always even do it with a metronome, but I could also, look for time when I do that. But that's like my go-to exercise, is just different permutations of that, because it's like I use that exercise to learn the keys, like to get used to playing in all 12 keys since I was in high school. So that's like my go-to exercise thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. what you just said, what you showed us was the exercise, but then you said what you look for is the tone. You look for the time.
Yeah.
So we saw the material, but then you're saying that you're not just practicing that for what you're really practicing is tone or sound, time, and let's say harmonic flexibility or fluency in the different key centers.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, nailed it. Okay, moving on. If you're not practicing enough, what is the first thing to go in terms of your playing? What's the first thing that you notice you've lost?
Oh, well, it's very literal. Like if I don't play upright and then I go play upright, I'm gonna have like freaking blisters the size of the pads of my fingers. So like there's that. Like that's extremely obvious to me that
Yeah,
it's gotta
yeah.
be that.
Okay. So if you're not practicing enough, the first thing to go is your skin.
My skin, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good answer. What's the best advice you were given about practicing?
I think it would have to be from uh yeah, I that's a good question. That's a stumper. I'm trying to think of when I would be pulling out my answer to this, like from what chapter um of my life, or if it whether or not it was a direct thing that somebody would have told me, or whether it was something that I kind of picked up from somebody without them having to tell me directly. And I have a feeling that a lot of the most important things I learned were things like that, where rather than explicit advice, you'll pick up something from having spent a lot of time with somebody, or from being mentored by somebody, and rather than it being anything that they told you directly, you just end up with this sense of that person. And when you think of them, then it's like, oh, you think of this thing, or this mood,
Okay.
or this kind of
So could you give me an
yeah.
example of something like that
Yeah.
you picked up?
Yeah. I have one it's probably not as like directly applicable as some of the other things that, I could have thought of. But when I was at the nonprofit, when I was at North Shore Celtic Ensemble, Claude Giguère, the founder, violin player, has been on the Rhythm Changes podcast. So listeners can check that out there to get a sense of what he's all about. But, violin teacher, played with the VSO and the opera orchestra after he moved from Quebec to Vancouver in the 90s. Started the nonprofit as his later thing. But he did that because he had a big injury. And he held his violin bow in a certain way that would be so wrong, like if you were going to teach it or something. But you'd never know, like from his playing, like he had fully adapted to it. And this is so abstract, but like I got to travel with this group, and like it's almost like a school band trip sort of situation. Like the first time I traveled with them, we got to go to the Atlantic provinces. So we got to like do this tour of like around like Nova Scotia and PEI, New Brunswick and Quebec. And then I went to the UK with them because they had this program with this youth festival where they had gone to the UK a couple times. And we went to China as part of like a bigger company. And so I spent a lot of time traveling with Claude and like seeing him warm up in the wings and stuff like that. And even though he didn't tell me like explicitly what he was doing, like now that you ask me about this, the first thing I thought of is like, well, what was he doing in those moments and in those kind of warm-ups? And like you could see it on his face, and you could see it in like this weird way that he held the bow. And it was almost like it's so funny if I ever end up showing this to him, I know he'll laugh, and I still enjoy talking with him today, but like it's almost like he's like a squirrel like coming out after the winter or something, and he's putting his paws on the ground to like figure out what's going on. And like it's just this, what I would take away from that in terms of it being advice for practicing is, on an everyday basis, what his priority was when he was doing this was just to make sure that he was comfortable, because he knew that's what he had to do to prepare for whatever it was that he was going to do. That like what, yeah, it's like being ready, right? It's like being ready to go perform. And so like, I guess just from being around him for like 5 or 6 years, even though I never took straight up lessons from him, I just saw that like the primary goal of practicing and warm-ups and all the repeatable stuff that you want to do every day is like establishing a personal comfort level for yourself. And so you got to tweak what it is that you do every day to make sure that it's something that can give you that feeling. And that can ebb and flow because it'll change. And like maybe you'll be playing a lot sometimes, maybe you'll be playing not very much some of the other times. So, but his presence, like it just showed me like there was this kind of search for comfort. And then I know from spending time with him that like when he was on, then he was on and he was comfortable despite whatever else he had to go through or whatever else he made changes to about his technique over his career or anything. Like the most important thing I learned from him, that the most important thing to search for when you're deciding what to practice every day is like the establishing your own kind of comfort level.
All right. Okay, so we got one more in the lightning round. I'm going to use that with heavy quotations. The lightning
Sorry.
round. No, it's all good. It doesn't need to be fast. Yeah, I should have a t-shirt that says that. Okay.
Nice.
How has your practicing changed since your early years?
I felt like in my early years I was always catching up. I always had that attitude. Like it was kind of a chip on my shoulder, especially when I was a teenager. Like I always felt like I was coming from behind. Like I didn't have the lessons and the prep and the training on the way in, and like I was playing with these people who are on a higher level, and like I was just trying to catch up to them every day. And so I kind of felt a little bit of pressure in my day to day as a musician from that. Not directly from them or anything. Nobody intended to pressure me that way, but I showed up with that attitude that I wasn't there yet and I needed to catch up. And so I would kind of aggressively pursue whatever it was I thought they were expecting of me. And like learn, like David Blake, right? Like you were there, I was there. We went to David Blake's Funhouse album release show at Frankie's, and it was awesome. And it was so crowded that we didn't speak to each other in the room there because there were like 100 people in there and we couldn't get through the crowd. But it was, when David put out his first album in 2013 called Next Year People, I was 18 and I was at CAP still, and he was at CAP still. And when Winston Winkler wasn't available to play with him, I played with him. So like when he asked me to do that without prompt, I got a copy of his album. I can't remember if I bought it from him directly or I borrowed it from a friend or something. I learned all his tunes. I wrote my own charts to all his tunes, and I showed up with my own charts for all his tunes because I felt like I needed to catch up. And like if I didn't do that, then I wouldn't make the grade. If I just showed up, I felt like if I showed up as I was, that wasn't enough. Like there was always something else I had to do to be able to hang and to be able to make the grade. And I've just gotten a little bit older, and even though I still struggle with that in other aspects of my life, fortunately I don't feel that way about playing anymore.
And is that because you caught up?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not I caught up. I just needed to like deal with that attitude.
Okay. Right. And so now you don't feel that you need to catch up, so to speak. If I had to guess, you trust the process, and you practice, you move forward as best as you can.
Yeah, because that attitude that I had as a teenager, and that still kind of sneaks in every once in a while with me, like it just comes from this general sense that whatever you are, just as you are, is not enough, right? And so if you feel that way, then it's like every time somebody asks you to play for a gig, you're worried that like, oh, if I don't come correct on this and if I don't put in the extra effort, then I'm totally going to flub this and like I'm not ready, and it's not gonna go well. But then as you get even just a couple of years older, then hopefully what I'm taking out of it as well. If they ask me, then I'm just gonna take them at their word that they asked me because they want me to be there, and I'm gonna focus on having a good time with them instead of worrying whether or not I have what it takes. And that was
Mhm.
just social learning, just over the years for me, I guess.
Yeah. And does it still creep in from time to time, or is that a thing of the past?
Oh, it totally is something that I still have to deal with. It's just not necessarily about stuff that's on the instrument. Maybe it's other work stuff or whatnot. But it's one of the things that I deal with on all fronts, and it was just kind of obviously an issue with me as a player for several years there. The band was really good about that, like just spending that amount of time with three guys and
Mhm.
and just getting so comfortable with them. I
Mhm.
think really kind of enabled that, and now there's this kind of reset of me not playing very much over the last couple of years and being in my late 20s now instead of younger. So
Yeah.
all that is going in the right direction.
Yeah. That's great. I think that it's I think it sneaks up on people. I don't want to say at any level, but maybe at any level. I mean, I've had that feeling to an extreme degree at times, um, and overall, it doesn't happen as often, but it can. In my experience, it can sneak up on me, and just that you approach something with this level of expectation that you cannot meet, you yourself cannot uh, achieve, and so you're just kind of setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah,
At
it's
least,
tough.
if not meaning like failing the gig, but um,
Personally.
failing personally. Yeah, that's right. Hmm. Um, all right, that was a hell of a lightning round.
It's
Thank
like
you
a
for.
thunderstorm.
we we opened up some boxes that we could certainly just keep going, diving deeper into those things. But I want to ask you um, uh, other things. So, um, what if you can describe your Rhythm Changes podcast website slash persona? Um, what is it? What is Rhythm Changes?
It's an outlet whose mission is to make it more fun and easier to be a fan of the Vancouver jazz scene and the creative community here. So
Mhm.
everything it does is in service to that. I'm trying a million things to try different things out, but ultimately that's the goal. It's a music blog podcast. It's that kind of media outlet just started by one person like me. And the goal is to make it easier and more fun to be a fan of this music and these people that we spend our days around here.
Yes, that's an excellent answer. So, my follow up question is, do you feel that the musicians in this, let's focus on the jazz community, jazz musicians in Vancouver, is there something that you feel we could or should be doing towards the same aim of making the music more, let's say, have more presence, have more people coming out, or
Yeah, I mean, I believe not in like silver bullets and magic solutions, but like small bets and single steps and incrementalism in a lot of ways, I guess is the word that just popped into my mind of how to describe that. But I don't really believe that you come up with the grand plan. I certainly don't really, like people are not designed to execute grand plans very well. Like over a long period of time, they just can't. Like it's not human nature almost to some extent. So I prefer like, just thinking about day to day, like, well, what's something that needs fixing right now, even if it's not broken, like something that there's something going on that's attracted your attention that could be improved. And well,
Mhm,
like what's step one on that thing? And
mhm,
then how do you do that, that just that one step? And then once you've done it, then you ask again. And it's like kind of a short loop. Like it's something that can be executed a whole bunch with minimal effort on each step, more casually and less of a grand plan. Just that hundreds and hundreds of times, I think, is what improves most things. Like that would be my personal philosophy of it. Others may differ, but yeah, I would shy away from like the prescription of some big solution. And in order to allow for that loop to be run like a whole bunch of times, I just want to like increase the volume of the conversation, like and the frequency of the conversation. So like if there's more happening, if there's more people getting the word out, like me, if or anybody else like me, I never want to be the only one. Like the more voices there are, the better talking about it. But if the frequency of the conversation is higher and more people are in touch with each other more often, then there's more chances to like run that script. Like what's the next thing that is catching our attention that we need to work on? How can we improve it? Do that, repeat, check again, kind of thing. That would be the philosophy.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna push you on this for a little bit more.
Yeah.
Something more tangible. So I'll just this came up a couple of years ago when I was hanging out with Victor Noriega and Chris Davis, and
both past Monday Midday guests.
Yeah, right. And I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Chris who said was just kind of examining the role of musicians in the scene, and if we want a better scene in the city, then musicians need to perhaps more consciously work towards it, and not put the blame on the city, to say, oh, Vancouver audiences don't come out, or there's not enough places to play. I can't remember what the details were, but along those lines, Will, is there something that you think musicians could be doing to enhance the scene? I'm not trying to say that it's not a good scene. I'm here because I love the scene. I love the musicians here. I'm inspired by it. It is also a smaller scene, and Vancouver is a different city than your Montreal and your Toronto, and certainly New York. So yeah, is there anything that you feel? I'm gonna leave it there and see what you got.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would totally agree with the premise that like, don't blame the city, that kind of thing. Like whether we're talking about the city as a municipality or the geography or just the aspects of the place, like, yeah, I'm not interested in doing that too, because probably everybody does, right? Like it's a grass is greener situation. Everybody's going to know their own place, and they're going to have their gripes about what the place is, and they're going to look at other places. They're going to think those other places are better. That's not unique to any particular place. That's for sure. So I totally agree with that.
Okay.
But in terms of what people should do, I mean, I like to discuss these things. That said, like I don't have the capacity to provide an answer for that. But what I can do is I can do stuff like do a free weekly article that hundreds of people get by email every week that features local albums, and do the podcast where I can talk about people and whatever we get into discussing, if other people learn from that and they try something else differently themselves, then that's great. And like doing Jazz Office Hours podcast with Corey Weeds, we do that, and now accumulating kind of a back catalog of stuff that now when people ask either of us questions, we can like point them to, we can increase the frequency of the conversation, and whatever happens happens. And like me as one person, like I have no idea what musicians should do to improve the scene. Like I don't even know what I should do next. And everybody's like that. We're all just trying to figure out our own issues and situations. But I think if we have our eyes open to, well, what caught my attention that could be done differently or done better or something, and we don't get too fussed about just trying one little thing to try and improve things. And if we all kind of carry that attitude, and if the conversation is happening between as many of us as possible, including as many people as possible at a high frequency, I have faith that it sorts itself out and that it gets better. So even though I know that I can't answer that question in any kind of helpful way, because everybody's got too much of their own issues to sort out, I can ask myself, well, am I helping increase the frequency of the conversation? Yes, I think so. Are other people doing that too? Yeah. When they're doing that, can I help them? Yes. Can I tune into something else that somebody's putting on? Like, I had Tim Reinert on the Rhythm Changes podcast. He hadn't presented a single show yet. The only thing we talked about on the podcast episode was him putting out the Kenton Lone and JP Carter It Becomes Us album. He wasn't even presenting his shows at numbers yet. So he's presented like 100 shows plus since he came on. So like, that's the amount of activity that he jumped into. And, when I notice that somebody's doing that, can I support them? Yes. So that's that kind of thing day to day is like an example of, how you can pay attention and then chip in. Right. But I know I don't want to frustrate you by not answering the question, but that's honestly how I think about it.
Don't frustrate me. Don't frustrate me. Well, stop.
Yeah.
No, that's, what that's, those are several tangible points and approaches. So I am not frustrated anymore.
Okay.
Our emails, well, our emails started long ago, but most recently you sent me an email about this very thing, Instagram, and you had some suggestions, and a number of people have come up to me. I think everyone who has come up to me to say that they've been watching this and getting something out of it has said, have you thought about doing this on YouTube or just moving it somewhere else, where video content is a little bit more better handled, let's say, or easier to access? Was that part of your suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't know if I was at the suggestion level yet. I didn't really know, enough from. I don't want to like swoop and poop. I don't want to come in and provide unsolicited advice, because that's the last thing I want personally in my life.
I'm soliciting. I'm soliciting your advice.
I know you're soliciting now, James, but I don't know if I knew enough to be of any service. I was just thinking like, I've made like 100 podcast episodes in the last year. Like, is there anything I know that could be of service to this? Because like, I want to tune into this. I want to watch it. I want it to be part of the conversation, because you are helping increase the frequency of the conversation in that abstract sense that we were talking about earlier by doing this. I noticed, so can I help? Maybe, right? So like, I don't know if I got to the suggestion stage, and I certainly didn't get to the stage of like attaching the name of a platform to it, right? Like a particular platform, that's all up in the air. Like, does everybody will everybody enjoy being on TikTok? No. So like, you can't advise that everybody should go and do TikTok now. Yeah. Like those are personal to what each person can handle and what everybody's capable of. But maybe the first thing that comes to my mind, like this is direct feedback with the intention of not putting you on blast or anything. It doesn't have anything to do with your role. It's just of the tech, right? It's like feedback on the tech of how this works. Like, is that where we're going here? Like, are you interested? Because I have a point in mind on that front.
I'll take it.
So it's watch back, right? Like, that's what I'm thinking of in terms of, so like, if you don't catch this live, how easy is it to watch it back? And that's where my question would end. Like, I wouldn't name a platform there or anything, but I would think about that question. And then you could look at other platforms and be like, well, which one addresses that the most? But if I think about it, like that's what I think of, because like I have a standing work meeting on Mondays in the midday. and your show is Monday midday. So like I'm 99% of the time I'm never going to catch your show. I'll try and watch it back, right? Like, and we made this work today, which was fun, and I appreciate that. It worked out. Thank you. But like most of the time I'm not going to make it. So like that's what I think about. I think about watch back. I think about replayability. Like how easy is it for me to go back and listen to the one with Victor Noriega that I missed? Right? Like that's where my question ends. And then at that point I would look to well, what could maybe be done about that, you know?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great. You keep telling me that you don't have an answer, and then you give me a really good answer.
Well, my spouse always is like, I try to ask you a simple question, then you end up asking me like 3 questions instead of giving me an answer. Like, I guess that's just my fault. Like that's just how I roll. But you know.
No, that's great. I would like to do this again with you sometime because we didn't even get into the work that you're doing with Greenleaf Records, and I'm very curious. So can we do this again sometime? Will there be a Monday midday where you are available?
Oh, I mean, we'll work it out. We'll make it happen. But I would also say that you know, you're going to be busy on this particular day, but maybe we will cross paths on Sunday, December 4th. Vancouver Jazz Orchestra presents the music of Thad Jones. You know, maybe there's a chance that we end up. I think I have a second floor Gastown gig that night, actually, now that I think about it. But hey, that's something you're doing. So we're plugging. You can't take the podcast host out of the podcast host here. I'm plugging you, James, to go out of this.
All right.
That's a thing that you're doing that's coming up, because I went to the first Vancouver Jazz Orchestra gig and I enjoyed that a lot.
Yes, that is. Well, thank you for that plug. And well, thank you for saving this Monday midday. And we will do a proper one. I swear to you, the first 40 minutes was me just testing clarinet mouthpieces that you caught. It was excruciating, and I apologize to the 7 listeners who stuck around for that. It was gear talk.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more thing, James, to close it out. Can I?
Yes.
You would have no idea about this because they would all just be faces to you, but I remember the first time I met you and heard you play. Do you have any idea what this would have been? Because I know, I can tell you right now if not.
It was New Westminster Jazz Clinic.
Oh, yeah, it was the Douglas College Summer Jazz Intensive.
Douglas,
you were teaching that. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. I don't remember what year, but it was like it was 10-ish years ago now. So, yeah.
Yeah, you were just a babe.
I was. I remember you took us to, at the time, Federico's on Commercial Drive, and that was when we played with like the little big band kind of situation. And we performed our repertoire for the people at Federico's.
Yes. Yeah. That was good. That was a good time. I remember we played some New Orleans vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my first impression of you. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, and here we are.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
We're still here
soon. Yeah. And thank you for being here, Will. Thanks for taking the time. I do really enjoy your insight, and just you have a very thoughtful and a different take on things, which is really refreshing. So thank you for that. For anyone listening, watching, thank you very much for watching. And Will's podcast, check it out. It's called Rhythm Changes. And it's great. So happy practicing to all. I will probably be back next week. I mean, most likely. That's kind of the idea. And so I will see some of you then. All right. Thanks, Will.
All right, peace.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Rhythm Changes podcast. If you enjoyed it, become a member for free today at rhythmchanges.ca. Get the free weekly article read by hundreds of fans in the creative music scene here in Vancouver, featuring a great artist, event, or recording every week. You can sign up for that right on our homepage at rhythmchanges.ca. Thanks once again to James Danderfer for hosting me on his show, and we will see you next time on the Rhythm Changes podcast.